Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultured Pull List. In this week's episode, we're going to be covering the three one-shot Batman Spawn crossovers: Batman Spawn War Devil, Spawn Batman, and Batman Spawn. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Mike, and today we're going to be covering the three Batman Spawn crossovers that have made their way into the comic mythos over the last few decades. Now, each one of these stories is a separate one shot. They're basically set in their own universe. They don't seem to have any sort of connection to the main DC or Image continuity, though one of these stories does take place in the same universe as Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. So that's interesting, I guess. But yeah, so let's get into these crossovers starting in 1994 with Batman Spawn War Devil. So our first Batman Spawn story, Batman Spawn War Devil, was written by Doug Moench, Chuck Dixon, and Alan Grant. Artist was Klaus Janson. The inkers were Klaus Janson and Steve Buccellato, and the letterer was Todd Klein. And this was released in May 1994. So our story begins with a flashback to Roanoke, the colony that disappeared, and in this version, a single word was written on the trees, Croatoan. And though the returning settlers who came to find an empty Roanoke couldn't see it, there was a pentagram carved into the tree line. So, flashing forward to present day Gotham, Matches Malone, aka Bruce Wayne, is getting information from a criminal, and he's getting information on Simon Vesper, who is a disappeared millionaire mogul in Gotham, and his company being run by Virgil Dare who is Vesper's lackey, is buying up a lot of different property in the area, and a lot of it's owned by Wayne Enterprises. And Batman's trying to figure out what's going on because it seems like it's linked to terrorist activity. So then we cut to Spawn, who's hanging out. He feels drawn to Gotham City, and then he sees a newspaper showing Arkham Tower, which was built by Simon Vesper, and Spawn has a flashback, which we see more of later, but he's reminded of Simon Vesper, though he doesn't quite remember who he is. Then we see Batman sneaking his way into Arkham Tower, intermingled with a flashback of Spawn's where he remembers that he was actually sent to kill Simon Vesper, and he ended up killing him. But Batman was also there. This all took place 6 years ago. Batman was also there, and he saw Vesper being killed and saw Al Simmons running away, but the body disappeared when Batman tried to go for it, which we see here. So then we go back to Batman. He breaks into Arkham Tower and beats the crap out of some of the guards and basically gives an ultimatum to this guy, Virgil Dare, telling him like he doesn't necessarily have the evidence that he's up to no good, but he'll be back when he does. And we see Spawn just kind of surveying the city. Meanwhile, we see a body rising from the grave, which turns out to be Simon Vesper. In the news the next day, that everyone now sees that Simon Vesper is back, and they're kind of it's hot news because Vesper was kind of a pillar of the city. Spawn sees that he's back and starts heading back to the tower, and then we see Vesper with Dare going down to the basement. Dare's kind of uneasy, so he whips his gun out. He doesn't trust Vesper, but Vesper's too quick, and he kills Dare, leaves Dare's body in the middle of a pentagram that Vesper draws with Dare's blood. He also writes the word Croatoan. Batman sneaks into the tower again to see this grisly sight, but as Batman's leaving, Spawn attacks Batman, mistaking him for some sort of demon. sent to attack him. And they fight briefly, but Spawn's suit stops him from using lethal force against Batman because it realizes he's a human and apparently has a mind of its own. Once Batman kind of knocks some sense into Spawn, the two of them end up talking and realizing that they're on the same side, and they're both going after this Vesper guy. And then we see Vesper just kind of doing a maniacal laugh and monologue in his tower. Now, Batman and Spawn try to make a connection between all the properties that Vesper has bought up in Gotham, and it turns out that they make a pentagram symbol. And just when they figure this out, Vesper kills all the power to the city, and the only light is a fire trail in the shape of a pentagram around all the properties Vesper owns, with Arkham Tower in the middle. Now, Vesper has this huge party for all the socialites and elite in Gotham, promising them that like they're going to be safe, but the rest of the city is going to be razed pretty much. And a bunch of dead bodies, basically a bunch of zombies, start appearing out of the big Gotham City graveyard. So Batman and Spawn make their way to the tower. Batman makes his way up the tower to confront Vesper, while Spawn makes his way down to the basement, where Spawn sees a portal to hell in this pentagram in the basement. Spawn is able to close the portal, but while Batman confronts Vesper, but Vesper has superhuman strength and quickly dispatches Batman, and it's soon revealed that he's actually a demon, Croatoan, who took over the body of Vesper and has been like his servant for years. And it turns out that he had the mafia hire Al Simmons to kill Vesper so he could take over his body, basically, I think is the idea. So Croatoan then takes like his final form, I guess, and he and Spawn fight, though he's beginning to overpower Spawn. But Batman is able to distract Croatoan long enough for Spawn to kill him and send him back to hell. And the story ends basically with Batman and Spawn going their separate ways, but in Spawn's inner monologue, he reveals that he learned quite a bit from Batman and kind of wants to be more like him. Because this whole time he was kind of having an identity crisis, but he respects how Batman just knows who he is and is unafraid to be himself. Our next story, Spawn Batman, was written by Frank Miller with art by Todd McFarlane, and the colorist was Steve Oliff and his company Ollioptics, and the letterer was Tom Orzechowski, and this also was released in 1994. So, Spawn Batman, a companion piece to The Dark Knight Returns. It seems to take place well before The Dark Knight Returns, when Batman's in his prime, but it's in that same timeline. The story begins with Batman at some warehouse investigating, and he finds a bunch of this illegal military-grade tech, and he is soon attacked by this giant robot, but he's able to find these special power gloves and is able to beat the robot, but he soon finds that there's actually a man inside, or at least the head of a man, and unfortunately he's unable to save him. And then the next scene we see on the TV, the news reporting about Dr. Margaret Love, who is this philanthropist being given this award and making all these promises to help all the poor in the city. And she has this mission, this homeless shelter that she's helping a lot of people with. But meanwhile, Batman's back at the Batcave, and he's able to identify the dead man, I guess the head of the dead man, who turns out to be a homeless man, presumed dead. So Batman goes to the homeless sections of Gotham and just kind of spies on the homeless to see what they're talking about. And he keeps hearing them bring up this name Al, talking about somebody named Al who is actually Spawn. And we get this cool shot of Spawn. Spawn stumbles upon some creeps literally setting this poor homeless guy on fire. So Spawn sets them on fire, but Batman sees this and assumes Spawn is just some murderous ass. So he attacks him, and there's a lot of back and forth, like trash talk between Spawn and Batman. It's kind of uncharacteristic of most Batmen, I feel like. And Batman like keeps calling Spawn punk and stuff. It's kind of funny. But they fight. Spawn with his powers is able to just beat the snot out of Batman. The only way Batman escapes is he uses this nerve gas on Spawn, which seems to upset his stomach, but that's probably about it. He doesn't, but it's enough for Batman to get away. So while Batman nurses his wounds, Spawn investigates the mission that Margaret Love has for the homeless, and he's confronted by these giant robots inside, similar to the ones that Batman fought. And he soon discovers, after destroying one of them, the head of a homeless man who Spawn actually knew was actually friends with. And he sees the face of Margaret Love on the TV, and he realizes that she is actually Nadia Vladova, the sadistic scientist he met on one of his tours in the army, in the military. And she used to perform these like horrific experiments on people, and she's just a total psycho. But so now he knows who he's up against, an old enemy. And meanwhile, Batman is called to the top of the police headquarters because Margaret Love got the police to call him, and she asked Batman's help to stop Spawn. Basically, she paints it that Spawn's just attacking her homeless shelter. So Batman and Spawn have another confrontation, but this time Batman has a power glove, so the odds are a little more even. But before they can finish their fight, really, Margaret Love's robots attack and basically beat Batman to death. But Spawn is able to destroy them with a powerful energy blast and is able to save Batman's life. But during the revival process, he and Batman kind of have a mind meld, and Batman's able to see how evil Margaret Love is, and also able to see Spawn's backstory, which Spawn still isn't a fan, or Batman still isn't a fan of Spawn at this point, but they reluctantly agree to work together to take down Margaret Love, who is holding this giant charity banquet on a ship with a bunch of influential people, but she's spiked the punch at the party, so they're susceptible to her suggestions. But Spawn and Batman quickly dispatch all her men, and Spawn actually ends up killing Margaret Love, much to Batman's chagrin. But there's this interesting part of the story where Batman and Spawn are communicating telepathically throughout this whole mission, and as Spawn is about to kill Love, Batman says, "No, she doesn't need to die." And Spawn says, "Why?" And then it also says, "Batman has no answer." So it's like, he's like, "Well, should she, she doesn't have to die, but also she kind of deserves it." So kind of interesting. But with her dying breath, Love is able to launch this nuclear missile that's going to destroy Gotham. So Batman and Spawn teleport off the boat and are able to deactivate the missile, and they basically go their separate ways, and Batman still hates Spawn and basically says, like, next time we meet, I'm gonna kick your ass. So yeah, they don't necessarily part on the best of terms. Now, our final story in our newest Batman Spawn was written by Todd McFarlane with art by Greg Capullo. The inker was also Todd McFarlane. The colorist was Dave McCaig, and the letterer was Tom Napolitano. And this was released actually last December 2022. So in Batman Spawn, we open with parallels between Batman and Spawn, showing that they've pretty much been fighting their whole lives. And we see a parallel between Martha Wayne, Batman's mom, and Spawn's wife, Wanda, and how they were both murdered. And we see Batman kind of brooding because it's Martha's the anniversary of his parents' death, and it turns out, at least in this story, that Wanda and Batman's parents were killed on the same day, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we'll tackle that later. So Batman's called by the bat signal. He's sent by Commissioner Gordon to go to Crime Alley, and he discovers this part of Crime Alley he doesn't recognize that really shouldn't be there. And he is met by one of the Court of Owls members who holds up a pearl necklace and basically reveals that his mom's necklace, had something special in one of the pearls, and they killed Bruce's parents to get that device that was one of the pearls. But before Batman can actually fight this guy, Spawn shows up because he's been told that Batman is holding Wanda's soul captive, basically, and only he can open the portal to save Wanda's soul, basically. So they fight briefly, but it turns out that this part of Crime Alley is actually this dead zone, which dampers magic. So the odds are actually evened at this point because Spawn's just kind of a person. So they're able to fight to a standstill, but they soon begin actually talking, and Batman reveals, like, I don't know who Wanda is, I don't have her soul. And Spawn's like, well, Wanda died this very day. And Batman's like, well, so did my parents. And we then cut to the Court of Owls, who are discussing that they weren't able to actually kill Batman. And so they send Talon to go and kill Batman and Spawn, I guess. Though I don't think they necessarily want to kill Batman because they do need him. They reveal that they need Batman to open this portal, I guess. They aren't really, but they need to use the pearl from his mom's necklace, as well as, I guess, Batman has to open the portal. So back at the Batcave, Batman and Spawn kind of discuss, how it's possible that Wanda and Martha died on the same day, and it turns out that Batman comes to the conclusion that the Court of Owls can control time and space. Basically, they're capable of shifting time frames, is what he says. And Spawn reveals that there's a Court of Owls in every dimension. Though on Spawn's dimension, it's called the Court of Priests. And they briefly just kind of discuss like their sidekicks and allies and stuff. So then they leave and get some information from some criminals. Spawn being a lot more lethal with it, and they're led to Joker, who gives them a little information on the Court of Owls, which is helpful. It's kind of vague, but he gives them information. And then we see this weird scene with Joker, and it seems like these little like violator babies. Kind of weird. But we then see Talon going to Crime Alley, and he recovers the Pearl device that the court needs, and he brings it back to his boss. But Spawn shows up, kidnaps the boss, and says for the Talon to meet them at Blackgate. So Talon meets Batman and Spawn at Blackgate. A fight ensues. Spawn is able to slap around the Talon a little bit, though Blackgate, it turns out to be a dead zone, so it dampers his powers. The Court of Owls head guy that they kidnapped is able to take Talon's bracer that fell off of Talon's arm, and Batman tries to stop him, but he ends up trying to kill Batman, which doesn't work out for him because Batman ends up killing him. Except that's not actually Batman. Spawn transformed himself into Batman briefly to kill this guy so that all the criminals in Blackgate would see that Batman can kill people, I guess, and they'd be more scared of him, though Batman is not a fan of it. They still have the Talon to take down, and Talon tries to tempt Batman to open the portal, saying he can save his mom, basically. And apparently they needed Batman because none of the Court of Owls or Spawn have a soul. Batman's the only one alive with a soul, so they need him to open the portal, but he doesn't fall for it, and he ends up kicking Talon into Spawn's cape, and Spawn's able to open a portal to the void that sucks both Spawn and Talon into it. And that's pretty much the end of Spawn for this adventure, though Batman's able to find the pearl, and he does keep it with him. Then we have a quick epilogue that seems to show Wanda, at least a version of Wanda, is alive in the DC universe, Batman's universe. And then we see in another universe that a version of Batman's mom, Martha, is alive, though it's not clear if it's Spawn's universe or another one. And then we see this quick tag of, looks like the Violator. And that's where the story ends. It seems like it's kind of setting up other stuff, but there is no announcement officially of a sequel to this, so I guess we'll have to see. Alrighty, so Batman Spawn, or I guess there's three of them with different names, but what did you think of these?
Yeah, so I kind of had a mix, not mix, but it was very all three books were very different for
Yeah.
me because I feel like going I guess I'll go through them like chronologically, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
The
they're
first
all
one,
kind of self-contained. Like, I think they're all
yeah,
in like a different continuity, technically.
right, right. Um, I think the first one, if I read them in the correct order, was the Chuck Dixon one. Um,
Yeah,
and
the
that was
like the
like,
War Devil one.
yeah, the one where like there was like a tower and there's like demons in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tower or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, that one was interesting, but I
Hmm.
felt like the story was kind of convoluted and I couldn't really.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
Yeah.
I understood the broad strokes, but I didn't
Hmm.
really understand like some of what was going on.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, like I like all the imagery and like all the demon stuff. I thought was
Hmm.
cool. Um, And then the next one, I think the next one might be my favorite. The I don't know what it was called, but it was the one that was written by Frank Miller.
Yeah, the Spawn. It was
Um,
like Spawn Batman.
yeah, yeah, and I like this one because I don't know if I've never read any Spawn comics, so I
Hmm.
don't know if that woman was like a villain, a Spawn villain, or she was just made up for this. I don't know, but I really thought that
Yeah.
was she was kind of interesting. She's like hypnotic, I guess, very suggestive and persuasive, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, I thought her whole thing was interesting, and I just felt like it had the best story of all three of them.
Hmm.
Um, and I really liked it was kind of almost comedic at times.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. Um, but yeah, it's my favorite because it's yeah, my favorite. There was a couple of good fights I think between
Yeah.
both Batman and Spawn, but then also they team up at the end like they always do. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's probably my favorite one. And then the most recent one came out last year,
Yeah.
written by Todd McFarlane.
Hmm.
Again, this one was kind of convoluted. It takes place like in the New 52, which I appreciated. I because I
Yeah.
like New 52, especially when it's related to Batman. So I did
Hmm.
appreciate that. But it was kind of confusing, sort of the same issue we had last week with, well, not last week, but
Right. With the
the
first one.
episode we recorded last. I don't know the order of
Oh.
this, but the
Yeah.
episode we recorded last
Hmm.
with John Kent Superman.
Oh
How
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm not really sure at what point this takes place in the continuity,
Yeah.
because like
Oh,
Joker's there and the Court of Owls are there, and there's some
right.
kind of big
I.
revelations that happen, but then like no one ever brings it up ever again.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like I'm pretty sure all three of these are kind of in just like a one
yeah,
shot like timeline. Like, well, the second one takes place in like the Dark Knight Returns timeline, technically. Like, it takes place
yeah,
before that, I guess. But I think the other ones
mhm,
are just
okay,
sort of like floating in their own like a timeline somewhere.
sure, sure.
Yeah, I think.
Um,
Oh yeah, finish what you were
no,
saying.
I was just gonna say like I appreciated the a lot of the New 52 stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but again, it was kind of convoluted and like
Mm-hmm.
there's something to do with like a pearl, and then like it opens the portal of hell and Martha's down there or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think honestly, I think for me, the newest one is my favorite, but that might be a bias because
Okay.
I read that one first, and then I went
Sure.
back and read the other ones. Yeah, so the first one I liked the I don't know I liked the way they kind of it was more of a Spawn story with Batman in it, which was interesting.
Right.
Like Batman even traveled to, or wait, which one did Batman travel to New York? Was that the first one? I'm trying to remember.
No, I think that was the second
Okay,
one.
all right. Well, anyway, so yeah, yeah, that's right. Because Spawn came to Gotham in the first one, and there was like that
Right.
Arkham Tower or whatever. I thought that was cool, and I thought it was cool, kind of thrusting Batman in a like a supernatural story.
Mhm.
You know, having him
Right.
have to battle. You know, because I always find that interesting because he's just a guy and he doesn't have any like
Yeah.
magic based powers or anything, and Spawn kind of had to do the heavy lifting. But
Mhm.
yeah, and then the second one I found really interesting. I think for me, something that kind of took me out of it was Batman's dialogue was just really weird to me.
Yeah.
And like, was it just me or was he like vaguely racist? Because like he kept calling Spawn like punk and boy like the whole time,
Mm,
like 80 times. I was like, what is going on? No, I thought it was like
okay.
I thought it was kind of funny like how much he hated Spawn. It
Right.
was like almost comical. Like what I really liked about the other two was that they kind of like they had like a bit of a beef because they didn't really know who each other was, and then like once they figured out they were on the same side, they just kind of teamed up. But in this one, like the whole time, Batman's just like yelling at Spawn and like giving him the middle finger and stuff, almost.
Yeah, I think that's just like a product of Frank Miller because
Probably.
like in every version of Batman that I've read from him, he's just
Hmm.
kind of like a dick.
Yeah. I don't remember him being like that nuts in like The Dark Knight Returns, but I haven't read it in a long time, so I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
one's more subtle, but if you
Yeah.
read stuff like like his Batman and Robin or like Batman
Oh,
Year
okay.
One and stuff like that. It's definitely more apparent.
That's fair. Okay, yeah. Yes, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think that one did probably have the best story, or at least the easiest to follow. And I did think
Sure.
that whole storyline with them having like a halfway house or whatever, like a homeless shelter that was actually like a front for like these horrific experiments was pretty
Yeah.
interesting. I did like that storyline. Um,
Yeah.
what I really like about the new one, the one from
Hmm.
last year, I think to me it has the best art. I really
Yes.
like the art style in it, and I did find it interesting the whole thing with the Court of Owls. I feel like it was almost sort of a first, like if they don't do anything else with that, it would be kind of dumb because I feel like they were setting a lot of things up on
Yeah.
purpose. So it almost feels like a
Right.
first like issue, than
Yeah.
just a one shot, even though it's technically a
Hmm.
one shot. Um,
Right.
but I did find it interesting the whole aspect of there being like a court of owls on like every universe or in every dimension or something. Even though they're
Yeah.
called different things, I thought that was interesting. Um, it was a little bit, yeah. I feel like they introduced a lot of stuff though and didn't really expand upon it much. Like
Mm.
Batman mentioned that, like, well, if what you're saying is true, Spawn, then the Court of Owls has found a way to like control like dimensional space or time and space or something like that. Um,
Right.
which is kind of like a really interesting concept, and I hope they explore it more. But they didn't really do much with it this time, And I guess the
Yeah.
pearl, like in Martha's necklace, was like a I guess it was like a like a device that could open a portal or something to like, I don't know, the
Right.
void or something. Like I feel, yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely was. I feel like it was definitely, at least for me, easier to follow than the first one. But
Hmm.
there was a lot of stuff they brought up and didn't like do
Yeah.
anything with. But I did
Hmm.
enjoy like the. I think for me, I think I enjoyed the dynamic between Spawn and Batman the most in this one.
Yeah.
For me, it felt like the most like organic, and like I feel like that's what those characters would like do in those situations, at least how I
Yeah.
understand them. um
Right.
and yeah, I thought it was interesting, just like the way like Spawn killed that one guy, and he was like, well, now all the criminals in Blackgate fear you because they think you might kill them. And Batman's like,
Right.
what the frick, bro? Like, it was just, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and also like
Exactly.
that tag at the end was like a little confusing, but the way I took it was that
Mm.
Wanda like is alive on Batman's Earth and like the DC
Okay.
universe, and Martha is alive in another universe, whether it's like Spawn's universe or somewhere else.
Right.
And then it seemed like I forget what that Spawn villain's name is, like the Devastator or something. Seemed like he and Joker were teaming up or something. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a mixed bag, but overall, I think I enjoyed that one the most. I had
Hmm.
never like read any of them or any. Well, I had read the new one, but I hadn't read the old ones before this.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we wrap things up and say goodbye to the Batman Spawn crossovers, let's do our
Hmm.
cultured picks. Now, what did you have for this
Okay.
week?
This week I picked up the Birds of Prey #1,
Oh,
and this issue, Black Canary is going on a mission, and for most of the issue, we don't really know what that is.
mm,
She's recruiting a team, and let me see. I believe the members of the team are Black Canary, obviously, Cassandra Cain, Harley
mm.
Quinn, Zealot, and Big Barda.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and so we don't really know what the mission is until the very end. And so basically what they're doing is somebody from the future has contacted Black Canary and basically told her that there's someone being held captive in Themyscira, and if they don't save her, like the end of the world will happen or whatever. So
Oh, wow,
very
exciting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That's cool. I honestly didn't know they were coming out with a new Birds of Prey series.
Yeah, I didn't either until very recently.
Oh, cool. My pick this week is Daredevil number 14. It is the end of the current Daredevil series that they're
Okay.
doing, written by, I think, Chip Zdarsky is his name. Yeah.
Okay.
and he's had like a really interesting story this whole time, kind of making Elektra like another Daredevil basically, and she and
Yeah.
Matt are teamed up, and they're running the Fist, which is the opposition to the Hand.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about this is at the end, Matt basically had to kill himself so that he could go down to the hell, or at least the part of hell that the beast, which is like the demon that fuels the hand, or like the hand serves. He had to go down to hell to like free his friends, who had
Mhm.
been killed by the hand. And it was kind of interesting because then he kind of got like these like god powers. Like, I guess he became like the servant of God for a hot second and had like an all white suit. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting, but he basically like died fighting the beast and his sister. And this issue kind of skips 6 months and sees how all his friends, including Elektra, are dealing with him being dead. And Elektra is basically like become Daredevil now. She's like the only
Mhm.
Daredevil. And but at the very end, like, it's very interesting. I know they do have a new series coming, like a new like issue one, like
Yeah.
kind of rebooting the whole series. But at the very end, Elektra goes into this church and talks to some priest, a blind priest who looks almost exactly like Matt. And like, like he reminds her of Matt, and she, but she's like, well, it can't be Matt. And then like at the last second, as this priest is like walking down the street, all of a sudden he like starts having like a radar sense flash or something as some guy's being mugged. And like, I guess it's supposed to be like Matt Murdock reincarnated or something, but I'm just very like
Interesting.
intrigued what they're going to do with this going forward.
Yeah.
And if he's going to like, if he's just going to be like the same Daredevil, or if, because he's obviously back, they're obviously bringing him back. Like, he's on the cover of the first issue of the next series.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious as like, is he the same? Is he different? Does he have like the same exact power set, or is he like have some
Mhm.
residual like, god fuel energy power like in him?
Right.
But yeah, pretty interesting. I'm definitely gonna follow
Cool.
the new series when it comes out. But yeah, that is the episode for this week, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Cultured Pull List. Let us know in the comments which Batman Spawn crossover is your favorite. If you would like to help support us on Patreon, you can check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's specific tier. Thank you so much to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. Huge thanks to Jose Navarro, who designed our visual asset. I have been your host, Michael Malillo, and my co host has been Luke S. Thank you again for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you would like to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media, you can use the QR code on the bottom left. And if you would like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right.